Hey guys, welcome back to the Coachable Podcast. It's Tori, and this is the show where I offer practical and spiritual advice for your everyday life, where I talk about how to get off of defense and onto offense, how to play the game of life in a new way where you are empowered to make choices that are going to transform your life from the inside out, where you can build a life and have a life that truly feels as good as it looks. And today I want to continue on the topic of codependent relationships because I think it's such an important piece of our healing. And this specific topic is going to get a little bit more detailed around what codependency can look like inside of some of our relationships. And this is something that I've personally dealt with, experienced, and something I have been working diligently for the past several years to work to heal within myself. And now is something that I support my clients and my listeners in doing so as well. And so if you've ever found yourself asking the question, what's the difference between helping someone that I love and trying to fix or save them? This episode is for you. So basically what I'm going to be offering you inside this episode is understanding the difference between helping or fixing or saving someone. What are the indicators that you are staying in a healthy and supportive role? And when are you moving into unhealthy dynamics where we are more codependent, where we're over-investing ourselves, where we become self-sacrificing, and where we're really over-investing in someone else's potential and sort of abandoning ourselves? I'm also going to give you some things to consider when it's how to know if you've crossed that line out of health and into codependency, and then how to shift from fixing and saving to healthy support. Now, this is something, like I said, I have personally dealt with and experienced. So when I think about many of my past relationships, one of the things I have been guilty of, and maybe you can resonate with this, is falling in love with someone's potential and really wanting to see them step into the highest and the best version of them. Now, a lot of times this comes from a desire to see this person thrive and succeed. And you fall in love with someone and you see all of these incredible qualities about them. And then after some time goes by, you also see kind of their blocks and where they're stuck or where possibly they could be improving or growing. And maybe you can see some of their blind spots that they're not even aware of. That's definitely been the case for me at times in my life. And I have straddled that line sometimes on the side of codependency where I found myself trying to fix or save someone that I love. And I know because I've been in therapy for years and years and years now and really gotten to the root for where this comes from for me. And I'll just give you a little backstory so you can understand my life and my journey. And maybe this will help illuminate for you where it might come from if this is something you also struggle with. So if you've been listening to my show or following me for a while, you probably have heard that I lost my sister to leukemia in 2011. She was diagnosed in 2009 with acute myeloid leukemia, which was such a shock to our family. Otherwise, she had been extremely healthy, and she was a senior in college. I was a senior in high school. And so this news came as a huge disruption and a shock to us. And quickly, we realized that she was going to be in need of a bone marrow transplant. Now, because this was all new to us, we didn't fully understand what that entailed or what that was going to require. But what we learned was that a sibling is oftentimes the best perfect match in order to donate a bone marrow, give a bone marrow transplant. So I went into the hospital and I got tested to see if I was going to be a good match to offer her this transplant. And unfortunately, what we learned was that I was actually a half match. So although my DNA comes from both my mom and my dad, and so did hers, I only was a half match. So we had to go to the National Bone Marrow Registry and to see if she could potentially have another donor. And this is why it's so important. This is personal to me, that if you ever feel compelled to, offer a donation of some kind, or to become a donor, it truly can save someone's life, because that's what we had to do. And luckily we did find a perfect match, and she went through that procedure, and she went into remission. And a few months later, after she was, in graduate school and trying to rebuild her life, she relapsed and unfortunately needed a second bone marrow transplant. And at that time, the previous and original donor decided that she wasn't able to donate again. So fast forward, and unfortunately, as you know, the end of this story does not end the way that we would have liked, but Anna lost her battle to leukemia in 2011. And that experience subconsciously changed me on a fundamental level. And I didn't really understand just how deeply that traumatic event affected me. But ultimately, I think because I was not the perfect match for her, because I was not able to donate at a time that she was so desperate and in need, and because of that, I subconsciously started to believe that it was my fault, and that I was the one that was who was supposed to save her. And I failed, and I couldn't. And I've never actually told this story publicly before, like this part of the story. And I can even feel myself getting emotional, because although I've worked through this deeply in therapy for years, there's still a little part of me that wishes things could have been different, of course. And so on a deep subconscious level, I think a belief got formed that day that I was told, this isn't going to be the road that we can take for her donation. And I started to think that, one, it was my responsibility to save her. And secondly, that because I wasn't able to, it was my fault. And somehow I wrapped my self-worth and my value as a human being up in that story. And so at that time, that seed got planted, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And I started to desire a way and an outlet to help people, because I couldn't help Anna in the way that I wanted to. So I pursued a degree in social work, ultimately leading to learning so much about psychology, human psychology, behavioral psych, understanding the mind and the brain and the mind-body connection, understanding trauma and how that affects us on a neurological, subconscious, and somatic level. And ultimately why I started this podcast, why I started coaching, why I started my own personal healing work, but why I do everything that I do. If I really think about why it all started back then, when I realized that my mission in life is just to serve and to be of service. Now, originally, it, I think, subconsciously came from a desire to soothe a wound within myself that felt inadequate, that felt not good enough, that felt like I had failed. Now, my desire to be of service comes from a much deeper rooted place of wholeness and healing, to know that, this is my greatest calling in life, is to be able to give back and to teach and to share the information and the knowledge and the insights I've learned that have supported me in my healing journey. But that just gives you a little bit of context for how deep this goes. And when we find ourselves trying to fix or save, when we find ourselves over investing in people, we get to stop and ask the question, why? Where does that come from? For me, it came from this desire to save my sister. Now, as I got older and I started to date and I started to have relationships of my own, I noticed a pattern. where oftentimes I would attract partners that were great in so many ways, but like all of us, they had their flaws and they had their limitations and their areas where they were unaware of how they were kind of getting in their own way. And the more I learned about NLP and somatic healing and therapy and trauma, the more I had information that I felt like could help them and support them. I felt more equipped. And yet I fell into an unhealthy pattern of trying to help them see their own potential. I started to therapize my partners. And what I found is that does not work. And that's not what they signed up for. So as I've continued to look at my own patterns and where those stem from, I've learned to come into a more secure place in myself where I'm not having to seek external validation from a partner or friend or someone outside of myself that can tell me I'm good enough, that can validate the part of me that felt inadequate. Because there was part of me that thought if they could only grow, if maybe I could love them into, their fullness, into their healing, then I will feel okay. And ultimately, that's why my relationships in part failed. That was my side of the 50%, So I want to share with you what I've learned about this and how I've supported myself over the years in healing this pattern. But the first thing I want to share is that there's really a fine line, right, between helping someone in a healthy way and trying to fix them or save them. And that line is crossed when your emotional well-being becomes tied to their healing, choices, or growth. So let's get into what helping someone, which is healthy and supportive, really looks like. I'll give a couple examples and offer some insights, and then we'll get into fixing and saving. So what does helping look like? Helping is really reflected in the fact that it empowers the other person to take responsibility for their own life. It's easy to fall into the other side of this line where it becomes unhealthy, where we start to take responsibility for their growth. But helping someone empowers them to step up to the plate, not disempowers them by taking responsibility yourself. It also respects their autonomy and their boundaries. Like I said, if you're trying to be your partner or your friend's therapist, they didn't sign up for that, right? That's what therapy or coaching is for. That's what I do with my clients when they pay me and come to see me. They have hired me to be that person to help them spot their blind spots, to help them acknowledge their shadow or the unconscious beliefs that are running the show, right? That's not the same as being in partnership, right? So respecting their autonomy, their sovereignty, and their boundaries is really, really critical if we want to stay in a healthy relationship dynamic. It also offers support without overextending or self-abandoning, where you step out of your own experience and you start to overextend, overgive, and overfunction in the relationship because part of you actually doesn't believe they're capable of doing it themselves. So it stays in your lane. You stay in your lane essentially and let them walk their own path while you cheer them on and support them, but you don't try to walk their path for them. If we want to stay in a healthy dynamic and help our partners, help our friends, even this can be related to our family members, right? You might have a family member or somebody who's struggling with addiction or struggling with financial problems or whatever that might be. And you see that this is an issue for them and you want to help them so badly. You have to understand and recognize that growth and healing is their choice, not your burden. I'm going to say that again. Helping someone recognizes that growth is their choice and not your burden. I'm going to remind you that, this line gets crossed from health to kind of codependency when our own emotional well-being becomes tied to their healing and their growth, right? So it's not your burden that you have to take on. And there was a younger version of me that thought that it was my responsibility. Now, no one told me that, right? It wasn't like my parents or doctors or anyone was saying, hey, Tori, if you don't provide this bone marrow transplant, like this is your responsibility. And Anna's going to essentially die if you don't do that. Like that's a very extreme example, but yet that is the example that, is the truth of my life. But subconsciously, I started to believe, and I started to carry it as a burden and as a responsibility that wasn't mine to carry. And the last thing here of indicators that you're staying in health and helping is that helping them doesn't drain you or make you feel responsible for their happiness. Okay. So what is an example of this? What does this look like in real life? So this could look like being there for someone when they're struggling, but allowing them to take action on their own terms. Now, is that easier said than done sometimes? Especially when you love someone? Absolutely. Maybe you're a parent and you're wanting to intervene in your child's life. Maybe they're a teenager or they're in college and you're watching them make mistakes and have to learn the quote unquote hard way. But what I've learned is by stepping in and intervening in someone's life and trying to prevent them from making choices that, will have consequences, we actually prevent them from learning. We prevent them from, essentially falling down, scraping their elbow and learning they can get up on their own and dust it off and they're going to be all right. Right? If we try to bubble wrap everyone we love, wrap everyone we love in bubble wrap and think they're so fragile that they can't make one mistake or make a choice that has consequences and they're not going to be okay, we're disempowering them. We're not supporting them. So another example of helping can look like offering advice, but only when asked. So make sure you're not forcing solutions. This is something, again, I've had to work on. I've had to look at. A lot of times men get a bad rep for if your woman is coming to you and she's upset or she's going through something challenging, a lot of times men can want to jump in with solutions to fix it. Well, how can I make you feel better by offering a solution? I've been guilty of that many times, especially when I think I have just the right answer that can fix all of this, right? Why wouldn't I give that to you? Well, the question becomes, did they ask for that? Do they want that? Are they asking for advice or are they just asking to be listened to and to be held and to be supported? And sometimes they just need a friend or a partner to listen and to hold their hand, not to fix it for them. And then the last thing here is how what this can look like is supporting a loved one who might be deciding to go to coaching or therapy, but not acting as their therapist, right? So what I want you to take away from what it looks like and feels like to help someone is that helping is based on love, not control, right? When we start to step into a desire to control them, we are stepping into fixing and saving. So that's kind of an idea of what I want you to come back to when you're asking yourself, am I walking this line? And am I helping or am I actually in a codependent dynamic where I'm fixing or saving? So what does fixing look like? Because fixing and saving are different. And I want to break this down. So fixing is unhealthy and it's kind of a byproduct of over investing. So it can look like trying to control or manage their problems for them. How many of us have been guilty of that? I know I have. I'm right along with you. But it can look like trying to control or manage their problems for them, feeling frustrated when they don't change the way you think they should, right? Now your emotional well-being is tied to their growth or their changing. How many times have we fallen in love with someone and we love who they are in the beginning, but we learn things about them and then we want to change them into the version of them that we want them to be versus accepting them as they are and allowing them to change if they choose to, if they want to. And the hard thing about this sometimes is that they might choose not to. But as Mel Robbins says, let them. They are adults. They are sovereign, autonomous human beings that can decide and make choices for themselves. You don't have to convince or prove or talk someone into doing something. And it can take a lot of restraint and a lot of consciousness and a lot of intention to not step over that boundary and, get frustrated when someone's not making the choices you think that they should versus just honoring their ability to choose. This can also look like giving more energy than they are willing to give to their own healing. So like you are over investing. You care more about their healing and growth than they do. Notice if that is a trend or a pattern for you. Also, if you become emotionally invested in fixing them so that you can feel secure, because something about their life or their choices is making you feel unsettled, unsafe. And you think, oh, if I can just get them to see this thing, if I can get them to go to therapy, if I can get them to go to church, if I can get them to read this book or listen to this podcast, are you always kind of passively trying to tell them what to do so that they will become who you think they need to be? And you are finding yourself that you care more about their growth than they do. Now, early on in my coaching career, I had to notice this within my own clients. And over the years, I've started to attract much higher caliber clients in the sense that higher caliber, meaning the people that work with me now are ready and willing to do the work. They're coming because they want to do it, not because they think they should, they think they have to, or think that's the right thing to do, but they're kind of dragging their feet. Because here's the thing, you can lead a horse to water. Can't make them drink, right? And there were even clients of mine very early on, 6-7 years ago now, that I would kind of give them the tools. I would give them the advice, or I would share the how, what to do, the what and how. But they would come back to their coaching session and they hadn't done it. They hadn't implemented anything of what we talked about. And I could feel myself over time get frustrated and say like, well, why are you here? Why do you keep coming back if you're not going to use what we're talking about and implement? But I had to disconnect my value and worth as a coach or as a service provider, as a facilitator. That is separate than their ability to actually implement or use what we were teaching and talking about. Those things are separate. And when you start to bleed those together and blend them together, your worth and your value starts to get tied into their growth and healing. And those things need and must be separate. Now, the last thing here is what fixing can look like is attaching your worth, which I just said, to how much you can help them be better. So examples of this might look like constantly giving advice when they don't ask for it, feeling like it's your job to show them their own potential, or trying to get someone to change behaviors they haven't chosen to change themselves. I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like personally. So I adore my dad. He is one of my best friends and really like my only family. And my dad has a habit that he has had since I was a little girl, and it's smoking cigarettes. And when I think about cigarette smoke and coffee, that is the smell of my dad. And it's like nostalgic to me. When I was 15, he quit smoking. And so there was a period of time where that wasn't part of his life or our life as a family. But when Anna passed away, he started smoking again as a way for him to help it was like a coping strategy for him. It helped soothe his anxiety. And it's something that he has continued to do since she passed. And this is a strong, like his vice, his little addiction. And I've had to acknowledge that this is a choice that he's making. He's an adult. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he doesn't need his daughter to reprimand him, to judge him, to shame him, to make comments that make him feel guilty or bad. That doesn't create an environment for love or for like us to feel connected. And that actually doesn't do any good to actually like getting him to quit, right? Shaming someone into quitting is not going to end in lasting results. So it's something I've learned. I've accepted this is a choice he's making. I might not agree with it. I might not like it, but I don't have to shame or guilt him or constantly berate him about quitting. And I recognize that he is a sovereign adult with a brain of his own. And he always said, God gave you a brain, learn how to use it. And I'm not going to disempower him by thinking I know what's best for him. Now, does the science and the facts show that it's unhealthy? Totally. But what's also unhealthy is me trying to fix him, right? And part of stepping out of that role of needing to fix or save someone for me has been letting them be themselves and loving them for who they are, where they are, without needing them to be different, right? Truly, that's what unconditional love is. And fixing someone is really based on the belief that they're incapable of doing that without you, right? My dad is self-aware. He's one of the most self-aware people that I know. And here's the thing with people who are struggling in certain ways, who have addictions of any kind, who aren't where they want to be in their life. The thing is, those people know it. They're not stupid. And they don't need you to put it on a sign and like shove it in their face every time that you see them. What they need is love and compassion and empathy and understanding and acceptance. And when we get into that fixer role, what we say unconsciously is that you're not okay as you are. What we're unconsciously telling them is that you need to change in order to be acceptable or lovable. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be in a relationship with them, right? My dad and I are not in a romantic relationship. My dad can make all types of choices, that don't impact me on a day-to-day basis. He lives halfway across the country. But if I was in partnership with somebody whose choices were affecting me on a day-to-day life, then I can let them be themselves, and then I can let me decide if that works for me or not, versus overextending and trying to fix it, right? So that's what fixing is. Now, what's the difference between that and saving someone? So saving is really, again, based in codependency, and it's hallmarked by self-sacrifice. So what does that look like? What does that feel like? It feels like being responsible for someone's emotions, their choices, or their life direction. You think you have to be the one to show them the path, to show them the light, to show them their purpose, right? I remember dating a guy who I adored, and he was lost. He was so lost in terms of his direction and purpose in life. And he just seemed to be kind of swimming in circles. And that drove me crazy because I had direction and I had clarity, and I wanted him to have the same clarity that I did. And in that relationship years ago, I started to feel that I felt that responsibility starting to well up in me for his choices or for his direction. And I would try to, give him the book to read or listen to this podcast or drop little hints. And it became passive aggressive. And he picked up on that energetically, and it didn't make him feel good. It didn't make me feel good. And none of us got what we were looking for out of it. So notice, when we start to feel like someone else's, like we're only okay if they're okay. So if they're struggling, they're feeling lost, they're going through grief, they're in a depression, do you feel like, oh, I need to fix this, I need to save them from this, because you're uncomfortable with their discomfort? This is an indicator of codependency. And there are ways that we can learn how to come back into our center and trust and allow them to be in whatever process and season of life that they're in. Another indicator of saving looks like ignoring red flags or unhealthy behaviors because you believe you can save them. So you make excuses, you justify, you ignore that like blatant red flag because you're like, oh, it's okay, I'll change them. It's also making excuses for their actions because of their pain or trauma, right? So, oh, it's okay that they do that thing. It's okay that sometimes they lose their temper and they scream and yell because they've been through a lot, right? So it's you minimize and make excuses for some of their choices and behavior because of what they've gone through. Now, that can be easily like misconstrued as empathy or compassion. But empathy and compassion is not going to make you abandon yourself and sacrifice your own well-being and put yourself in danger, essentially, or allow yourself to be abused or tolerate disrespect. That's not what empathy and compassion does. Okay. Those are different things. So notice, am I just holding space and compassionate, meaning to be with someone suffering? I'm being here present with them in the season of life that they're in. Or am I actually tolerating mistreatment, abuse, or disrespect? And am I trying to save them at my own expense? That is where we get into very, very dangerous codependent territory. And a lot of pain and hurt can come from that. Couple more things on what this can look like for saving is feeling like their healing is tied to your love, effort, and sacrifice. And then abandoning your own needs to take care of others. So this can be heavy. This can be hard. And when all of you've known, maybe you grew up in a home where you had to become the parent really young. You had to be the grown up. You had to take care of your siblings. You had to be responsible for your parents' emotional regulation. You had to morph and conform and mask and push down your own feelings so as not to upset your caregivers or upset the environment, right? When those are the environments that we grew up in, which many of us did, we learn to abandon our own needs and our own feelings to keep the peace, right? If you've ever said, oh, I'm just here to keep the peace. Well, whose peace are you keeping? Is it yours or is it someone else's? And I would assert you learned how to do that out of a need to survive, out of a need to belong and to be accepted in the environment that you grew up in. For me, that wasn't the case as a child, but this came into my experience, when I was in high school, and I started to associate that my sister's healing essentially was tied to my worth or my love or my effort or my ability to give her what she needed, even though that wasn't based in truth. And the thing is about this, these subconscious beliefs, they're not based in truth, but it's a truth that we believed. It's something that we believed and thought it was true when we were younger, and we didn't have this awareness. So as we grow and mature and we become adults and we start to do this deeper work, we have to confront these lies that we have believed are true, that our worth or our love, ability, or our value is based in someone else, is based in external validation, is based in someone else's growth or their healing, or that they're okay, then that means I can be okay. Now, true healing and wholeness is recognizing, how do I stay in my center and I can be okay despite what other people are deciding and choosing, despite my environment, despite what's happening around me, that I can source internal safety from within and validation from within versus needing to have it from a partner, a friend, or a spouse, right? So some examples. Again, I want to give you some practical examples of what this looks like. If you've ever stayed in a toxic relationship longer than you knew, you stayed past that expiration date because you thought they just need more love to change. Now, if you've got a big, open, compassionate, bleeding heart like I have, you might have fallen into this. There are people that I've loved deeply, and I thought, they just haven't known what real love is, and maybe I can show them. And sadly, that didn't end well. And I can never love someone enough into loving me if they are incapable, if they don't have the skills, the tools, they don't have the capacity yet because they haven't gone through the things in their life that would teach them that. And I'm not that, teacher. I don't have to forego love and respect and reciprocity in order to teach someone that. It can look like constantly rescuing someone from the consequences of their actions. If you swoop in and save the day so that they don't have to feel the pain of their own choices, right? It can look like pouring all of your energy into someone who isn't giving you much in return. And it can also look like tolerating mistreatment because ultimately, they've been through so much. So in some ways, you're allowing yourself to be abused, even if you wouldn't use that word, emotional, or might not be physical abuse or of any kind, but that lack of reciprocity, the toleration of mistreatment or disrespect actually is a lack of your own self-worth and self-love, because you can't love someone into loving you back, unfortunately. You can be an example, but at some point you have to learn to walk away from somebody who's not treating you in the same way. And that is a hard pill to swallow, but there's so much growth in medicine in standing on your own self-worth and saying enough's enough. Enough is enough. And ultimately trying to save people is based on the fear that they will collapse without you, that they won't be okay, and that you must bear the weight of their transformation. Now, again, a lot of this might be subconscious. You might not be aware that this is something that's going on, but when you start to peel back the layers and you start to peel back and look at the patterns of your relationship dynamics, whether it's in romantic relationships, dating, friendships, or with family, where you've allowed mistreatment, you've poured and invested so much into someone and felt completely disappointed or rejected or abandoned, then this might be something that you might want to explore deeper with a coach or a therapist of your own to see where might this stem from for you. This is something I've spent a lot of time exploring personally. So I want to give you 5 things that can help you identify where or if you've crossed that line out of health and into codependency. So ask yourself, if you're listening or watching at home right now, am I more invested in their healing than they are? Am I ignoring my own needs to prioritize theirs? Do I feel guilty if I set a boundary with them or I say no? Do I believe they wouldn't survive without my help? And lastly, am I seeking validation through being needed by them? If you answered yes to any of these, it might be time to step back and reassess. I know personally, for me, there is a part of me that loves to be needed, that feels valuable, that feels like I'm contributing and I'm being of service. But it's important to really reflect and say, is this coming from a wound, a wounded part of me that is seeking for that external validation by knowing that I'm important, that I matter because someone needs me? Or is it coming from a place of solid, sourced security within myself, that it's coming from a worthy place of knowing I know I'm valuable. And because of that, I'm going to care and I'm going to trust them to be a sovereign individual and to make their own choices. And I'm not going to allow mistreatment of myself or abandon myself in the attempt to save someone else. So lastly here, as we wrap up, I want to just give you a couple things to consider on how to shift from fixing and saving into being a healthy place of support, a healthy, supportive friend or partner, and someone who can truly extend that unconditional love. So the first thing I would recommend is detach from their outcome. So their healing essentially is not your responsibility. That's number one. Letting go of the need to feel like it all rests on your shoulders. This unnecessary and likely unconscious pressure that you're putting on yourself to show them the light, to show them the way. A lot of times this can happen if maybe you've had some kind of breakthrough or transformation of your own. You've had some kind of spiritual awakening. You've done plant medicine. You've gone on some kind of retreat or had, a spiritual encounter of some kind, and you felt like, wow, I've learned, and I want everyone to experience this love or this connection. And so I remember when this happened to me, it was, I think around 2018, I went on a retreat and I was, in a place where I was really seeking help and support and a new way to, for myself to process the grief that I had not yet processed from all of the trauma in my life. I went on this retreat and I experienced healing and connection and breakthroughs that I had never experienced before. And I felt such relief and such hope. And I left feeling so empowered to, take control of my life again and to feel like I was back in the driver's seat, that I'd kind of moved out of this victim mentality of feeling sorry for myself and felt like there was truly hope, like a new way of approaching life and seeing life. And I was on fire. If you've ever gone to like a Tony Robbins event or you've had an amazing experience at some kind of gathering, you know what that can feel like. And when you're on fire like that, you often want to go home and tell everyone that you know and love. I felt this way after doing mushrooms or having, ayahuasca or something like that too. You're like, wow, I want everyone to know what this is like. And yet, it's important to understand that we can easily dip into that place where we think it's our job to be like evangelical Christians or like disciples of New Age spirituality or disciples for plant medicine or whatever it is that you're into, right? To tell everybody. Now, what I have found is that your life is your greatest testimony. Be the example just by how you show up, what your presence, how your presence makes people feel, the safety, the lack of judgment that you're able to offer someone, the acceptance of understanding that not everybody will want the same things you do. Not everybody's going to want to grow at the same speed or same pace or in the same ways that you do. And if I could distill everything that I've learned down, it's that truth and love are synonymous. And when you think you've found truth, that you've also encountered love, and that the best way to influence people is to be the change that you want to see in the world, not force or control it, not trying to impose that onto someone else, but just let your life be the testimony. If breath work has changed your life, it's changed mine. If, whatever it might be has changed your life, then it's not your responsibility to get everybody to buy into that. You don't have to be a salesperson for your cause. Just live it. And if people can see the change in you, if your life becomes a reflection of something that they think they want, then maybe that will interest them, right? But you don't have to convince anybody of anything, because the truth doesn't require convincing. So again, how to shift from fixing and saving to healthy support. Detach from the outcome. Their healing is not your responsibility. Hold space, but don't overfunction. So support without overinvesting. Be aware of your energy and your output, how much time and energy you're giving to someone and to their healing and to their growth. Respect their pace, as I have already mentioned, because you can't rush someone's growth just because you see the potential. Let them make their own mistakes, because I'll tell you this, pain is often the greatest teacher. And ask yourself, am I giving from love or from fear? Another way to ask this is, am I giving from love or for love? Am I doing this to get something or just to give without attachment to an outcome or an end result? Because at the end of the day, you can love someone so deeply and not try to save them. Their healing is theirs. Your healing is yours. And that is your only responsibility. And when we stay in our lane and walk our path, we will inevitably run into the people that need to cross our path. But our job is just to stay committed to our own growth and healing, to be the light, to shine that light, and not to enforce it on someone else and burn it down. We're not trying to like put our little candle and force someone to let us light theirs. It's like, if they're asking for it, you can offer that advice or that feedback. But until then, let them make their own choices. Let them make their own mistakes, and let us continue to walk our path and honor ourselves. So I hope this helped you in some way to acknowledge maybe where you've been overfunctioning or overgiving or overinvesting, where you've been, misallocating your energy or your time to someone else's growth and healing. Because here's what I've learned, you guys. There was so much of my life where I spent investing in other people's potential that I gave away that energy that I could have been investing in my own. I wanted other people to grow at the same pace I was so badly that I didn't realize I was slowing my own self down because I was waiting for someone else to catch up, right? I was going slower because I didn't want to leave people behind. And I know it can be scary to outgrow people. And sometimes that happens. There's the analogy that says, like, when you're on the way up to the penthouse, sometimes you have to stop at some floors along the way and let some people out. And that's their choice if they're not ready to go all the way with you. But let them make that choice and honor that, and honor your path by continuing to walk it bravely, courageously, and with love. I love you guys. Thanks for being here. I hope this supported you. And if it did, my request and my ask and invitation is to leave us a rating and review on Apple or Spotify, and share this with a friend who might need to hear this. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That is such an exciting place where we're putting out this content every single week, and you can see my face. You can get to know our guests that we're going to be bringing on, see this beautiful studio, and it just brings it a little closer to home when you watch. At least that's how it makes me feel. So subscribe to YouTube, and if you feel compelled, leave a comment. What did you learn about yourself, about your relationships, about codependency from this episode? Leave me a comment. I'll make sure to respond. And if you're not following along, you can follow us The Coachable Podcast on Instagram, and I am The Tori Gordon on TikTok and Instagram as well. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one, I am taking high-level executive coaching clients for holistic performance and leadership coaching. This is high-level one-on-one support that provides a holistic approach to healing and executive leadership. So if you are a leader, if you are a CEO, an athlete, an entertainer, someone who has influence and is dedicated to making a big impact in the world and wants to lead from a heart-led place, I have a couple spots available for coaching. So if you're interested in that, just send me an email to hello@torigordon.com. I'll shoot over an application for you to submit and set up a call to see if it's a good fit. All right, that's it for this week. That's all she wrote. I love you guys. See you next week on the Coachable Podcast. Bye.